Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I would like to introduce your speakers for the 2021 Fiscal Focus session. Lisa Eves. Lisa has more than 20 years professional experience in government and nonprofit industries. She has joined the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities in 2014 and currently serves as the Operations and Contracts Director. Lisa is responsible for developing and executing the annual budget, manages all aspects of the grants and contracts process from solicitation to termination and closeout, and in partnership with the council, and that develops, updates policies, procedural manuals, and other documents used in daily operations and grants management. Lisa coordinates with representatives on multiple state agencies and departments to ensure timely and accurate grant processing, invoicing, accounting, and federal reporting. She is the mother of 2 young adults. She enjoys singing, writing poetry, and travel. She also enjoys being administrative backbone to the council and is appreciative of the opportunity to impact the lives of people with developmental disabilities. Cheryl Matney. Cheryl has joined NACDD in 2004 and currently serves as the Director of Technical Assistance. Prior to joining NACDD, she worked as a federal auditor, a quality assurance coordinator, implemented volunteer programs for a health services company, and coordinated a disability advocacy program. Additionally, Cheryl was Executive Director of the Alabama Council on Developmental Disabilities. Cheryl has been a consultant to several state agencies as well as co-founded a local nonprofit organization that administered grants and contracts for social service agencies. Cheryl is the parent of 2 adult children. The youngest lives with developmental disabilities. Cheryl enjoys spending time with her grandchildren, loves to fish, grow pecans, and enjoys watching all types of sports. With that, I'll pass things over to Cheryl and Lisa. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. You can move to the next slide, Jen. Thank you. Wanted to give you an idea of what we will cover today. We're going to bring you information about the council budget and project periods, a 4-step process to use when monitoring your budget, cost sharing and match reporting, and resources that are available to help fiscal staff, but really the resources can help all staff. This session is primarily informational. Details on each item that we're going to cover will be highlighted in this PowerPoint so that you can easily access the resources. The presentation has been posted to the itechhelp.org website under the tab TA Institute, and it can be accessed by clicking on July 2021 OIDD Virtual TAI. So before we get started, we wanted to answer a question that many people, new and seasoned, ask us. And you guys often ask how councils get their money and what federal agencies and offices are involved in how your funding comes to the DD Council. So we wanted to provide you a very broad view. Congress, moving from left to right, you'll see I started with U.S. Congress. Congress votes on the amount of money the DD Council program receives annually. The appropriation is part of the budget for the Department of Health and Human Services. The acronym is HHS. Health and Human Services is a federal department that is concerned with promoting health and well-being of U.S. citizens. It promotes research in social services, medicine, public health. It also implements programs related to social service, civil rights, and healthcare privacy. HHS has 11 operating divisions and over 100 programs across the various agencies. ACL, which is the Administration for Community Living, is one of those 11 operating divisions. ACL, as you heard, if you were with us earlier, Jennifer Johnson mentioned that ACL is coming up on its 10th anniversary, and it was created around the fundamental principle that older adults and people of all ages with disabilities should be able to live where they choose, with the people they choose to live with, and have the ability and be supported to live fully in their communities. The DD Council program is administered through this agency. Within the Administration for Community Living, there is a Center for Management and Budget. The Office of Grants Management is an office within the center. And as you guys know, the acronym is OGM. And yes, OGM. Sometimes it gets transposed to OMG, but it really is Office of Grants Management. And they issue the notices of awards to DD councils. And so then moving over to AOD, which stands for Administration on Disabilities, this is the entity that provides oversight and guidance for the DD Council program and other DD programs. But for our purposes, they provide oversight and guidance. And then we have the Office of Intellectual and Developmental Disability Programs is within AOD. And that is where we get our stellar guidance, instructions from staff like Sarah Newell Perez, Sean Calloway, we have Allison Cruz and David Jones. So there are many offices and federal entities that are involved from beginning to, where the money comes from all the way down through until you receive the notice of award on your desk. Now I'd like to turn it over to Lisa.
Hello, I am Lisa, and I am thrilled to be here today presenting and sharing the stage, the virtual stage with Cheryl. Cheryl is the guru. I'm just the question asker. So we're going to have this session today in a sort of tag team format. We're going to have this session today, and I will ask questions and Cheryl will give answers. Hopefully everyone will enjoy, and we're going to start with the council budget. The council budget is the foundation of all council operations. Each year, the council budget should reflect and support state planned activities and general management activities, sometimes called administrative costs. Let's look at each one. As you know, the DD Act requires council to use at least 70% of the annual grant award for state planned activities. The state planned activities part of the council budget should reflect and support grants, contracts, interagency agreements, council staff costs when staff are implementing the state plan activities. These costs should support the work that is planned for the year and as reflected on the annual work plan. As you know, the DD Act requires council to use no more than 30% of the annual grant award for administrative or general management costs. The administrative or general management part of the council budget should reflect the DSA reimbursement. It should reflect general operation costs such as salaries, phone, rent, utilities, council member and staff travel. All costs for council meetings, dues and subscriptions, conference fees, and other items that support the overall management and operation for the council program. Next slide. There are two major reasons the council should develop an annual budget. The first is the annual budget supports the required federal reporting. As you know, federal financial reports, abbreviated FFR, are required, and they are also called the SF 425. And the council financial information is also a part of the Program Performance Report, also known as the PPR, and the annual budgets can assist staff or other personnel with developing and meeting the reporting requirements. The second reason is the annual budget supports council members as they fulfill their responsibilities required by the DD Act. Specifically, members are to develop, implement, and monitor the budget with the amounts paid to the state or territory to fund and implement programs, projects, and activities. These are things in the council's 5-year plan. Next slide. Cheryl.
So we wanted to try to connect the dots with your budget to state plan implementation. So as you guys are finishing up or at the end process of developing your new 5-year plan and the first 2 years of your annual work plans. And as you reflect on what's in those annual work plans, you know that the work plans have you identify the key activities that the council has planned to do for a particular fiscal year. And since we look at budgets on an annual basis, you have an annual work plan on an annual basis, you can really try to think about the budget as the state plan in numbers. And you get guidance from your council members on the activities that they want to take up in year 1 of their plan. State plan activities should be supported and reflected in the budget, but it also you should be able to look at your annual work plan and see that those activities have been adequately budgeted in your council budget. And so it brings us to a couple of very key questions. If you're finding that you have difficulty or you cannot budget your annual grant award, is this possibly a time to be able to review your state plan and your annual work plan to see if you have enough activities included in your work to be able to use the federal funds provided? This could be an opportunity to be able to increase activities so that you make sure your federal funds can be used. The flip side question is, if you find that your budget is bigger than the amount of funds, federal funds you have available, do you need to then review your plan and your annual work plan in order to reduce the number of activities that you have budgeted? And you say, oh my gosh, reduce activities, oh my goodness. We can't do that because our council members expect these activities. As always, we don't have unlimited money, and we don't, the grant awards don't grow in big ways. And so sometimes you find as you operationalize things, you might need to go back to the council and further prioritize activities if you're finding you don't have enough money to support all of the activities council would like funded during a particular federal fiscal year. So this gives you an opportunity to refine and prioritize the planned work. Next slide. So part of our charge from the Planning Committee was to really highlight the amount of resources that can support you guys in your work when you're managing the council award. So on the council budget topic, we have three substantial pieces of TA tools to help you. One is in the financial guide. The financial guide includes information around the development process, role of the council member. It helps you understand as staff what information do council members need to be able to fulfill their role. We also have things, common questions by council members. What do they ask the most? And we have a little guidance on food and beverage because that is always a hot topic. Not so much when we're doing the virtual meetings, but really when you guys think about, you know, in-person meetings, this becomes something that is very helpful. The next piece is the council budget process. This is a training for council members. It is in PowerPoint format, so you can insert your own council, you know, if you have policies, procedures. This is really the basics. You can tailor it to your state or territory. And then we have 3 training modules, and it was designed for staff because it is very technical in nature. But module 3 has a big piece on budget development and what would need to be included in a budget. Lisa, next slide, please.
So here we have frequently asked questions. ITAC staff gets lots of questions throughout the year, and we've selected a few that we thought you might like to see. So I'll call this session, Let's Ask Cheryl. Why did you say annual budget?
Well, annual budgets support the council's work, annual work that has been approved by your funding source. Since you report annually on the status of that award, that is why we say annual. The DD Act also indicates that the council will prepare, implement, and prepare, approve, and implement a budget using the amounts that are paid to the state or territory. Since Congress approves that money annually, it is, you know, your budget on an annual basis and not on any other basis. So that's why we say annual.
Okay. Should we budget the entire grant award each year?
Absolutely. Although we know now this is the moving target and the most cumbersome piece for council staff, but thinking about your annual award, although you have 24 months for each annual budget period, you guys really, in order to be able to get the money into action and get the projects moving, the work being done, budgeting the entire amount each year gives you the maximum opportunity to use those award funds to their maximum extent. And on the flip side, it reduces the risk for reverting funds because people didn't have enough time to get the work done. Next slide. So now we want to turn our attention to monitoring the budget and project periods. So these are, sometimes we see the federal government, and at least in the last couple of years, tried to use different terminology that is easier to understand. And so this is what people around our network would call the obligation period. That's what the budget period is. It's the amount of time that you as a council have to get the money promised and in play to address some of your state plan activities. The project period, and the project period is also within the obligation time frame. Sometimes you guys hear project period and period of performance. Those are compatible terms. It's the amount of time you can do the work. Budget and project periods are required by law. So, and it's also in regulations. It's reflected in your notice of award under the terms and conditions section. And it's also reflected in official guidance from OIDD and ACL to councils, as well as in your TA resources. Lisa?
Next slide. Monitoring and managing the budget and project periods are important because both areas have time limitations. We will review those time frames in just a moment. But to answer the question, why does the council need to monitor and manage the budget and the project period? Here are two main reasons. One, to increase the council's ability to operationalize the state plan activities that are reflected in the annual work plan so that the positive impacts can happen for people with developmental disabilities, their families, as well as people working the system and communities within their state or territory, as well as other stakeholders. So if you hear a little distraction, after a week of calling, they decided to cut my yard today. So I will try to get through this or move so we can have less distractions. But I'll continue with the reason for the budget. The second reason is to reduce the risk of potentially reverting funds to the general treasury. As a reminder, reverting funds means not using the funds. If funds are reverted, they are no longer available to your council. It is important for you to know that when funds revert to the general treasury, the funds are no longer required to be used for people with developmental disabilities and their families. The funds are added back to the general treasury of the United States government. In other words, don't give any money back. Next slide. So, in order to monitor and manage the budget and project periods, you will need to be aware of the basic time frames. Please note, the information reflected here is for standard grant award years. It does not reflect any adjustment to timing for special conditions or no-cost extensions. Here you will see the award begins the first day of the federal fiscal year. This would be October 1. The budget period is for 24 months. That is the same length of time as the obligation period. In other words, the amount of time you have to obligate the money is also the budget period. The project period is also 24 months. That same 24 months, this is the amount of time provided for the work to be done. So we have a budget period and a project period. Budget, you obligate the money. Project period, you actually perform the work. And then you have the liquidation period, which is 36 months or 3 years from the beginning of the award. This is the amount of time that you have in order to actually expend all the funds, receive invoices and expend those funds. Now, deobligation occurs when there is unused money from previously obligated money. So an award or an activity that you did not spend all the money, you can deobligate it and then obligate it for another purpose within the grant period. Next slide. Here is an example. We use the current fiscal year award 2021. The award begins on October 1st, 2021. It is also known as federal fiscal year 2022. The budget period for this award will be October 1, 2021. This means that the project can begin on October 1st, 2021. The budget period will end on September 30th, 2021. This means all contracts, agreements, grant agreements must be in place by September 30th, 2023. The project period also ends on September 30th, 2023. This means the work must be finished by September 30th, 2023. The liquidation period, again, we're granted an extra year, will end September 30th, 2024. This means you can pay bills for expenses incurred during the budget period. Next slide. So we have another frequently asked question. So we will ask Cheryl. Does the award begin on October 1, even when the council does not get our notice of award to full funding until later? Cheryl?
Yes. So even though you might not get your official notice of award until November, December, you may not get it on October 1st. The clock starts ticking on that award October 1. And there are no adjustments for a delay in receiving the notice of award, or there are no adjustments when Congress issues continuing resolutions, which just means that Congress is going to give you a part of your annual award, and they may give you a subsequent notice with another piece of your award. In other words, they parcel it out in smaller chunks of money throughout the year. There are no adjustments. So the award date starts October 1, the budget period and the project period. And I know that sometimes councils have indicated that they have state policies in place where you can't even advertise a notice of funds available until you have the notification from the federal government, and that will delay you somewhat in getting your money on the street and the work started. And there are no adjustments on the start. So you're probably saying to yourself in your inside voice in your head, that's not fair. It starts October 1 and it's a 24-month period. So we do know the challenges that you guys face with that. It is important, though, that you at least recognize that so that you can really look at your internal process for budgeting and, you know, getting your funds or getting your activities in shape enough to be able to put announcements out of funds available, or think about other ways to get your work done so that you are able to maximize the amount of time to budget and get the project work done. Next slide. So our next area of focus is monitoring the budget for effective management. We wanted to bring you 4 basic steps that you could consider for use as you guys are monitoring your budget. Lisa?
All right. Next slide. So we'll walk through the 4 basic steps of how to monitor and effectively manage your budget. So the first step is to establish the actual position of budget items. This means reviewing each budgeted amount minus the actual expenses. Also adjusting for outstanding expenses, those invoices that have been submitted but have not yet been paid. And if you have a designated state agency, You may need to get financial reports to help you establish actual position. Remember to tell the DSA staff what you need and by when so that they can provide this information to your council. The second step is to compare your actual position with your original budget. In other words, compare what really happened financially with what was planned. Show the differences in a variety of ways to help people understand the actual versus planned information. Charts and graphs are sometimes helpful, or showing numbers as percentiles can also be helpful. The third step is to determine why there may be a difference. Because we have a time frame to the budget, the money, and to do the work, it is important to know about problems or delays in spending the funds. Some grantees have problems, things like staffing problems, setting the project aside to take care of other things. Maybe there are delays in getting a contract or a grant in place, or the grantee is slow in invoicing. And sometimes it is just a budget miss. This means that the budget was funded too high or too low. Either too much money was asked for and the grantee cannot spend it, or too little money was asked for and they need more money to complete the work. The fourth and final step is to act. What do you do with the information you gain through monitoring the budget? You will want to inform your leadership, like your executive director and or the council, because these are the people who make the decisions for your council. One of the DD Council Act states that it is the responsibility of the council to approve, develop, and monitor the budget. This step, by you performing all of these steps 1 through 3, will help the council perform their responsibility. An important part of this step is to provide an opportunity for the council to de-obligate and re-obligate money to other projects and activities during an open budget and project period. Again, this will help reduce the risk of reverting funds back to the general treasury. Remember, do not give any money back. Next slide. So here we are again with more. Let's ask Cheryl. What does it mean to de-obligate and re-obligate funds?
Okay, so this whole process starts with the word obligation. Obligation is the legal promise to pay for something. As we looked at just the elements of budget, it could be a contract, it could be an interagency agreement, it could be a grant, but a legal promise to pay. So that means that at some point, you guys determined how much money you would pay for a project or activity. And the council approved the moving that money into a legal promise to pay, so that there was an obligation that occurred. Sometimes we see that, you know, as with any project, you guys know, it could be slow to start. They could have trouble performing and just a lack of spending the money for the work. As you monitor and manage your budget, oftentimes we see councils will come down to, they will look at a mid-year point, or they'll get into the third quarter of the year and really start looking at the actual versus planned. What's the actual spending? And so if you have a $50,000 contract and you're 9 months into the project and you've only spent 50% of the funds, it's a great time to be able to check in with the grantee to see if they're going to spend. If they indicate that they cannot spend these funds in this fiscal year, you know, or you're, for whatever reason, you can get those funds deobligated, meaning you have an agreement that it would be a certain cost. They're now indicating that they can't, they'll come in under, they're going to leave a stack of money on the table. The council can deobligate those funds, meaning no longer promising that whatever the original budget was, but returning some to the general treasury of the council so that the council then can re-obligate money to a project or activity that needs to be funded. And when you guys monitor the budget regularly, you can see where spending is slow. You can see where spending is not occurring, and you don't want to wait too late because of this 24-month budget and project period. We need to identify and be able to project our budgets as accurate as possible, because when you deobligate and reobligate, whoever you're reobligating those funds to end up with a shorter period of time to do the work. Next slide. So that brings us to one of the, probably I can hear some collective eye rolls around the nation: cost sharing and match requirements. Why are we continuing to talk about cost sharing and match requirements? I just want to remind you guys, cost sharing or matching, you can use both terms. Cost sharing is match. It just means it's the portion of project costs that are not paid for by federal funds. Next slide.
So I'll go a little more into detail about this lovely match or cost sharing. So first of all, match is required by the DD Act and is supported in regulations and instructions, and is also a term and a condition of accepting the award. So when we accept the award, we accept the fact that we have to ask for match. As you may know, the council can pay up to 75% of the total cost of the project with federal funds. This means that the cost share or match amount is 25%. In some cases, when the council is conducting work or targets audiences in the urban or rural poverty area, the council can pay up to 90% of the total cost, or there is a 10% required match. As a quick reminder, match cannot be provided from other federal funds. So you can't match federal funds with the federal funds that you're receiving. In-kind match or cash match must follow allowable cost rules. And we're going to talk about this a little further, but if a grantee provides entertainment for a project and wants that entertainment to be used as a match, this would not be allowable because entertainment is not an allowable cost on federal funds, so it would not be an allowable cost on match funds as well. Next slide, and we'll have Cheryl talk a little more.
So this brings us to the question. If you guys keep talking about match, and we want to remind you guys about match, is match being reported for your council? Here is the grand question today. So to answer this question, we really want to just give you a reminder about what federal reports that match is being required for. And of course, we know that there are two. All match and cost share is reported on your standard form 425. And this is a required financial form, federal financial report, that is filled out annually. It is also a term and condition in your notice of award. And if you look at it, you know, you can find the 425 form. You can Google 425 to see an example if you've never seen one. But the information about match is really three key things. So the report and what either your council staff, or a lot of times it is a designated state agency, fiscal program person, they're having to report the required recipient share for the reporting period. The required total recipient share that's the amount of match that's required for this reporting period. The total recipient share is the amount of match that you collected. And the remaining recipient share is total match less match provided. So you're just subtracting to get to that answer. And then in the program performance report, there is a section called Council Financial Information. And so you really are having to report similar information inside your PPR. But the wording is just a little different. So you can see the terms are different. We're asking, you guys are having to report match required for a reporting period, match met, and match unmet. It's the same information, different terminology, but it is important that you are reviewing the 425 for the information. That is the official federal financial report that is required. The PPR information is for programmatic purposes. It does not satisfy your federal financial reporting requirement. That is the 425. Both are federal reports and must be accurate. And so relying on the information that you're getting in your 425 is really important.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Mm-hmm. So how do you know if your match is being reported? If you are your own DSA, you probably know because you are filling out the forms. But if you have a designated state agency and their fiscal staff people help with filling out the forms for you, you have to ask three key questions. Who fills out the SF 425 for each council grant award? How does the DSA fiscal staff determine recipient share information? And how do you know if the report has been submitted? So Cheryl's going to give us some tips to answer these three questions. Next slide. Mm-hmm.
So here are some technical assistance tips to improve reporting. I'm sure you can read between the lines to improve reporting. So reporting needs to be improved is if you can just transpose the sentence there. So match is an area of compliance. It's included in your terms and conditions in your notice of award. And the notice of award is the legally binding issuance of the basic state grant award. So when you as the council or your designated state agency accepts the grant, which means anytime you draw a penny off that grant, you've accepted the terms and conditions and you've become legally obligated to carry out the terms and conditions of the grant. And so you are the award recipient, so you're subject and kind of stuck with all of these reporting requirements. So this is why it's important. So find out, here's your tip, find the answers to the previous questions. You really do need to know who. It is all about who is filling out that report. And of course, this requires some great communication between the council staff and designated state agency staff. Or if you're relying on another agency or department to fill out the report, whatever that partnership is, you've got to work together to fill out the report. And so one of the most prominent times that you're going to collaborate with whoever's filling out the report is around match. Most councils collect match information from your grantees. A grantee will send in an invoice to you, you track the match internally, and then the payment of whatever the invoice is then gets routed through the state agency for payment. So you may not have a process in place where the designated state agency is also collecting documentation on match provided. So if you don't know who's filling out the report and when and by when do they need that match information, your match collected may not be getting onto the report in the way that you need to demonstrate compliance. And so, you know, having this partnership with your, if you're relying on another person to help with the report, that is one of the best ways to make sure your financial information is accurate and complete. The DSA, many times that person will not know that you have tracked and collected match unless you inform them. And so we also think that you absolutely need to request to see this report before it is submitted. And that way, if you are noting that your match numbers are off or your obligation numbers are off and you want to figure out where the differences are, you can address those questions before the report is submitted. And then finally, we want you all to really request a copy. If you're not getting a copy of your 425 for each year of the grants award, so you would have 3 that would be active, request a copy so you can see that the report was submitted. Not only does this provide you with documentation that your council federal financial reports were submitted on time, but it also helps your staff when they are completing the council financial information section in your PPR. So there are really good ways to figure this out. And just as a side note, you guys probably remember, you know, now there's some streamlining with federal reporting and the drawdown information and those quarterly reports. So it is really important that you guys are looking at your reporting in a way that really informs you of what is being reported on your behalf, especially if you are relying on others to do your reporting. Next slide, Lisa.
There are several match cost sharing resources available on the itachelp.org website. I'm going to repeat that. There are several match cost sharing resources available on the itachelp.org website. Here is a listing of the resources that provide details on match and costs. The Financial Guide for Council, revised in 2021, and you'll find that on page 22 through 31. The second resource is the ACL resource, the Council and the DSA Partnership, Enhancing Communication to Ensure Fiscal Accountability, on page 18 through 20. It also covers allowable costs. Everything counts: cost principles, administrative and state plan costs, and recipient share and match requirement calculations and documentations on page 2 to 15. We also have the federal financial reports, the 425, and match requirements, program support center guide for completing the federal financial report, the 425. And lastly, the ITAC staff created a training or education resource, basic fiscal training module number 2. This module deals with the topic of match, the entire module. Next slide.
So before we go into the fiscal resources, we do want you guys to be aware that all of the resources that we have on our website, or any resource that is available to you, has been reviewed and approved by OIDD. So, and particularly for the financial resources, most of them are reviewed by staff from the Office of Grants Management. This is a partnership that we have through the TA contract, and it should give you some confidence that the information and resources provided are supported by the funding source. So it's supported by ACL, AOD, and OIDD. We would not want to lead anybody astray, so I think you can feel very confident in the quality and the work or the information that's being provided. So now, in order to wrap up this session, we really want to give you a sense of the fiscal resources that are available. We did convene a work group of fiscal staff from a lot of different councils, and one of the things that they told us is, we don't know what resources you have, and if we just pop onto your website, we don't really know where to find the stuff. So we asked them what would be helpful, and they told us. And so what we were remiss in is not telling the entire DD Council network. Next slide.
So we thank you for telling us, Cheryl, and I'm going to review some of it because I know it wasn't easy for me to find, and now I think it's much easier, and we'll tell you how the website is set up. So there are several resources that serve as the foundation for grants management. Of course, the DD Act itself, regulations such as 45 CFR 75 and 45 CFR Part 1326, as well as agency issued information, memorandums, program instructions, notices of awards itself, and the HHS grants policy document are all very helpful. In addition to the federal resources, ITAC staff, in partnership with ACL and OIDD staff, create resources, training, and education for council staff. ITAC staff developed several fiscal management resources that Cheryl will talk more about. Next slide.
So the primary guide is called Financial Information for Councils. Now, it is 41 pages. Please don't let that scare you off. There is a table of contents up front that are linked. So if you're looking for something, you can just click the link in the table of contents, and you don't have to flip through all 41 pages to find it. We have major sections. There's a section on grant information. So anything on the formula, the notice of award, regulations. There's a section on fiscal responsibilities of the DD Council. That's important because that's also an area of compliance. As we've been reinforcing throughout this presentation, you know, your practices need to be able to support what the council member is required to do. There's a section on the federal financial forms, all of them. It's a dazzling section, stunning in fact, so check it out. There's also a section on grant match requirements and a section on functions of the designated state agency. And because they have, you know, some very specific responsibilities outlined in the DD Act. And then there is also a TA brief that's included on if your DSA is asking for reimbursement for functions of the designated state agency. Next slide.
A relatively new set of resources are the basic fiscal training modules. There are 3 training modules available. Other councils have found these helpful when orienting new staff members. So I'm particularly excited about this because I have new staff members starting next week. Well, actually, they're starting Friday. So we're excited about these 3 modules, and this will be our go-to. So Module 1 talks about funding, ACL, Office of Grants Management role, law, regulations, ACL, AOD, and OIDD guidance, formula grant, notice of award, and the federal financial reports. All of that is in Module 1. Module 2 moves on to non-federal share and aggregate, which again is match. And of course, it's either 25% or 10% on each grant, but the aggregate is for the council as a whole. But they'll also talk about basic rule and exceptions, urban and rural poverty area designations. So as you'll remember, I said before, Module 2 is all about match and documenting and reporting match. Module 3 talks about cost principles with highlights on travel management, council meetings and activities and conferences. Talks about the council budget and methods for allocating staff time to both state plan and administration functions. So those 3 areas, we suggest that you check them out either for new staff or for yourself as a refresher or review. Next slide, Cheryl.
So we have our Fiscal Resources tab on the website. We've provided you a link here directly to the Fiscal Information tab. The page is organized by the most frequently used resources. There's only 2, the Financial Guide, the 41-page document, but also the federal allocation table. So that will link you over to the ACL website that has your allocation tables there. The fiscal topics are presented in alphabetical order, so you can find them quickly and easily. So we do have information on administrative cost, allowable cost, council member training and resources, designated state agency, federal financial reports, on it goes, but they should be in alpha order. And I do see a chat box, Catherine's noting that many of our links are broken on the website. We will check those out. Thank you for letting us know. Anytime you see a broken link, please feel free to email Angela or myself, and we want this to be useful to you. And if a broken link is there, that's not useful. Next slide. A relatively new a new thing we've done this year are our notables. We do a document each month on notable rapid response questions. One of our standard services is that rapid response service. So you can ask any question, and Angela and I will answer your questions within 48 hours. We're a little faster than the 48 hours. and no question is too small. So if you want to know something, all you have to do is ask us. And then each month we develop a notable rapid response question document. And one of our standard categories is all about funding. And so it's created, it's shared with on the ITAC listserv. It's sent directly to executive directors, and it is also available on the itachelp.org website. Next slide.
So I just
Lisa,
like to say,
what's in those?
I absolutely love the notables also, because no one wants to read 31 pages, but we have questions. So the thing about the notables that's great, it makes you feel like Cheryl and Angela are right at your fingertips. And some of the things that are in the notable questions, I'm sure we all share these common questions and look forward to receiving the notables and the answers as often as they come out. So we have the allowable cost questions. Do these sound familiar to you all? Questions about technology, supplies for council members, advertising and public relations, participant support expenses. The notable talks about match questions. Are the P&As and USEDs exempt from providing match for council-funded projects? In-kind match can be unrecovered, indirect costs be used. Calculating match amounts, and can volunteer hours be used as match? We have questions on documentation, from personnel expenses for council staff assigned to the state plan and administrative tasks, as well as grantees. And some of the other questions include, do we have to make funds always a competitive bid? And also program income and notice of award questions. So you will see the reference here on itachelp.org, field notes and other resources. It is a gem, kind of picking Cheryl's brain on the regular. I really enjoy these notables. Cheryl, next slide.
Thanks. So a couple of the other questions that we get often is around those federal assurances. And, you know, in your notice of award, you will see just a little snapshot of your federal assurances. There are many federal assurances. There's no easy way to do this one. We have a variety of councils that use different strategies on it, you know, because you're passing federal assurances down to your grantees or your subrecipients. So what we've done here is provided you with the link. It is on the ACL website. It's under their section on managing a grant. And they have all of the, under terms and conditions, if you'll click on that, you will see all of the federal assurances. Now it will, it's lengthy. I will give you that. There's a lot of information there. And so it comes down to when you are, particularly if you're your own state agency or you're in a state agency and you're a grant making council where you're putting contracts together and you want people to know what federal assurances they must meet in order to stay, you know, use your money. It's a condition of your funding. You guys often ask, well, what do we have to include? This is something that you will want to determine. Can you do a short list? Can you do an abbreviated list? Does your state or territory make you put all of the information there? So some of it is you guys figuring out at the local level what is required and in the way of information. I know some councils have been able to link to the broader wording on, you know, human trafficking, for example. Do you have to put the entire federal law and regulation on human trafficking in there. I doubt it, but you could link over to it and have the person who's receiving your contract sign off that they understand what this regulation or this assurance is about. And on the topic of allowable cost, everybody has a question about allowable cost. Most of your questions can be answered with subpart E of the federal regulation, 45 CFR 75. There's an entire section, subpart E is cost principles. In that section, they have it in alphabetical order, and they give you a description of allowable and disallowed cost. So it's very helpful to have this one pinned somewhere, because I look at it often. And, you know, as much as I answer questions and just think about, you know, what's allowable with a federal dollar, I do have to look it up, because everybody's situation is just a little bit different. And of course, Sarah, Sean are very helpful on questions around allowable cost. So this brings us to our Q&A time. So I want to go back, and I wanted to just, when we talked about liquidation, so liquidation, you know, means paying for things with your award. So the way we phrased it, you know, liquidation can occur in all 3 years. That final 12 months of your grant award truly is for only paying the bills. And so that final 12 months is not to do the work. Generally speaking, I realize we have some no-cost extension and special conditions in place, but in general, that the liquidation period is just to pay the bills. So that is the answer to that question. Now, I'm going to go back up. Oh boy. Okay, so dollars leveraged as match. Can you please explain dollars leveraged as match, and how is this tracked? Okay, it's easy to answer the how is it tracked. You track it at the local level. Now, the harder part is dollars leveraged. As you guys know, you are asked in the PPR to indicate if you were able to leverage any dollars as a result of your initial investment in the work. So it's not the same thing as match. Dollars leverage could be public, private, it could be federal or state or local. So you have to be very careful that if you've identified dollars leveraged, which means as a, you know, you're trying to indicate that dollars leveraged was either, are you using some of it for match, or is it over and above? This one is complicated. I would have to know a little bit more, so contact me, whoever that person is. Another question, is a request for applications a legal promise to pay? A request, an RFA, an RFP, request for proposal, no, that's not a legal promise to pay. Neither is your council voting to fund something at $50,000. The legal promise to pay is what will hold up in court. It's the contract. It's what somebody is, what you're legally tying in a contract or a formal agreement. Question about no cost extension. Can you also give grantees extensions? Yes. The no cost extension means that the work can continue to be done. So you have to work within the framework of your state, though. I really want to be clear. Just because the federal government said you have an option for a no cost extension, now you have to make sure everything lines up, because you probably have a contract in place and it might be a time-limited contract. If your state only recognizes that time period on that contract, you may need to amend your current contract to give that extension. Make sure that all of your processes are being followed, from what the federal government allows you to do all the way down to what your state will recognize. Okay, if a council approves funding to a particular grantee and the grant project is delayed, but an official grant agreement was not yet executed, does the council need to deobligate the previously authorized funds, or does this only take place if an official agreement is in place? So I would say I'm not sure that I would consider that to be a legal obligation. The council approves funding, but the contract was never put in place. So the answer to that would not be a deobligation. They've authorized the funds. The funds were never executed into a legal obligation. Match. I have a designated state agency. If audited, what documentation would be required? So on match, you not only do you have a requirement for aggregate, but you also have to meet the other requirements on match, which for every project that you're conducting. So this would not apply if it's council staff implementing state plan activities. So this is for your projects, your standard projects, and those projects in an urban or rural poverty area. You do need to do the detail on how much match is required for those projects, because you are not allowed to pay greater than 75% of the total cost of an activity or a project with federal funds. And then for urban and rural poverty areas, you're not allowed to pay greater than 90% of the total cost of the project with federal funds. So you will have to track project by project match, and then that is the documentation that you need. It is not as easy. Our award is not as easy as it's a straight 25% match of your annual award, because we have exceptions to the match rule. And so if you have a DSA that is assuming you have to come up with 25% match, that's not the case. So let me know what support you need. Let Angela know what support you need if that is an issue for you guys. Let's see, I've got a question about, in order to claim the 10% match, so that would be the urban or rural poverty area. Let's see. Yes, the secretary states a city or county must have 20% or higher poverty rate as designated by the U.S. Census Bureau. Make sure you're using U.S. Census Bureau. And the law says that the work must be targeting individuals who reside in urban or rural poverty areas. So I'm gonna, since I know who put that question in, I'm going to say, let's do a follow-up on that, just to make sure that we are on the same page. That is a very complicated question. Someone has an issue with the designated state agency charging more than 5%. They are not budging. Call me. We need to set up a little meeting with your DSA. That is not allowed. And so they need to understand. A lot of the ITAC resources are broken links. Are these being updated? I'm assuming, I think I will go back and look through and make sure everything is live. And yes, we have a link for the basic fiscal modules. I believe on the PowerPoint slide, I did, and let me just look real quick. I do believe that on the slide, no, you're exactly right. If you go to the fiscal page and scroll down to staff training and education, they are in PowerPoint format. So, got it. Okay. Let's see. If a project is being implemented in rural and urban poverty areas, the match is 10%. So you can pay 90% of the total cost. Your grantee would come in with 10%. Since you receive more than one grant award notice, is it safe to say that we do not know the actual full year grant award amount at the beginning of the fiscal year? No, you will know your annual grant award. On the notice itself, there's usually the total amount of the award and then the amount that is being made available in this notice. So you should know where you stand. It's just you don't have access to your full award. If there are unspent funds which are returned, is there a requirement for matching funds to be spent first, or is it possible to return matching funds during the reappropriation period for unspent funds? I'm going to follow up with you to make sure I understand the question fully. So I don't want to ignore that. That's an important question. I don't want to ignore the question. So since you did provide your name, I will reach out to you individually. And then I have a final question. In light of COVID and the federal dollars that are available due to COVID, and considering we are cash accounting process, if we were to apply for and receive FEMA funding, how would these funds affect our council federal grant? Will we need to reduce our federal grant? I don't think your federal dollars, I'm going to reach out to you as well, since you provided me your name. So the basic grant award is the basic grant award. Now we have to think about if you're using other federal dollars for some other federal purpose, that stuff doesn't affect your federal grant award for DD Council unless there's something I don't know. But let me reach out to you individually as well. Jen, you said we had a couple of hands raised, and I want to be respectful of time.
Okay, I will go ahead and unmute Kristen Larson.
I'm sorry, I didn't know I had my hand raised. but I just, I've been multitasking. Okay. I just appreciate it. You know what? One question I did have, though, about the de-obligation, we tend to work with our DSA, and if we realize like a sub-award isn't spending all their money, then we're able to work with our DSA to de-obligate that. Do we still really have to go back to the council and de-obligate that, or I just report on it of like, okay, some of our sub-recipients didn't spend all their money, so that has gone back into, FY20 fund.
Yeah.
That's how we do that. Is that okay?
Well, so I guess the question becomes, is the council aware of it sounds like a standard practice. Is the council aware of that? And if they had the opportunity to be a part of that process, would things change?
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, it really comes down to kind of the local kind of thing. I do understand that, but the council is making those decisions about where investments are made. So, and they need to be aware when a grantee is not able to spend, and because that informs them in some way the next time, should we be appropriating that much money, or is there an opportunity to do something a little differently on the front end?
That's it.
Okay.
That's all the answer.
Well, I want to thank Lisa from the Georgia DD Council. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate your expertise, and thank you all for your time today. Please, check out our resources. Let us know. I'm always interested in hearing what would be more helpful to you all as you're working the financial side of the council. Angela and I do all year long. We're always wanting to know if that resource isn't working for you. Tell us your thoughts on what would make it better. Because our resources need to be helpful. So anything you have, you're not going to hurt our feelings. I am concerned about broken links, so we will get those wrapped up. And I'd like to turn it over to Angela.
So thanks so much, Cheryl and Lisa, for that great information. We just wanted to let you guys know that our next session for the Technical Assistance Institute is going to be July 15th. And that starts at 2 p.m. on isolation and its impact on abuse and neglect and exploitation of children and adults with IDD. We have an amazing panel set up for that session, so we're hoping that you're going to join us at that time. Also, when you do sign back on for the next Technical Assistance Institute session, please go ahead and sign on just a little early so we can make sure that you're connected well, and that your sound is working. It's always great to sign on a couple minutes early if you can. The PowerPoint, I know Cheryl said this in the beginning, but in case you missed it, the PowerPoint for today's financial session that Lisa and Cheryl just did for us is already on the itechhelp.org website. So we do have a TA Institute button at the top of the website, and you will just click on July 2021 OIDD Virtual Technical Assistance Institute, and you'll be able to find all the materials there. And as Cheryl said, the financial page on the website also has tons of information for you. So I just wanted to again say thank you to our speakers. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. We had an amazing crowd. Thank you, everyone.